Welcome everybody, and we had a closed session, so now we're back to open, and thanks for everybody getting back on the line, and looks like our internet's all working, so that's good news. So I have a motion here moved by Councillor Gutson, second by Deputy Mayor Turton, that the minutes of the Town of Minto January 26, 2021 regular council meeting and January 19th, 2021 closed session meeting be approved. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Passed. Okay. Additional items. Has anybody got any? I've got maybe one. And Judy. Okay. And anybody else has one later, let me know. Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Elliott, the resolution that the Town of Minto convenes into the committee of the whole. All in favor? Okay, good. There's no public meetings. And if I could have the council's indulgence to change the delegations up a little bit as far as what order. And if we can maybe, Councillor Anderson can hear us, I would like to move County Councillor Anderson up to first, and Michelle and Bill, if you could be second, and then we'll do the Watson Associates, the Minto Water, Wastewater last, if that's all right. So anybody that does a delegation and doesn't want to stay for the rest can just sign off that way. And I know everybody's busy. So, okay. Can I have somebody move that? Deputy Mayor Turton, second by Councillor Gutson. All in favor? Passed. Okay. So Annaline, I've kind of moved David up. Is he ready or
So I'll just ask Quinn to promote County Councillor Anderson up to be a panelist if possible.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep, just give us a few minutes and she can do that. I'm not sure if she's able. Quinn, are you able to promote? There he sounds like he's coming up. I see that he's on, so I just need County Councillor Anderson to turn on his microphone and his camera, please. County Councillor Anderson. We'll just give him another minute here.
There he comes, I think.
Yep, there he is.
Oh, he almost was there. I saw him for a second. There he is up top there. I can't see you, David. We see something.
He said he could hear you because I'm going downstairs because it's not working upstairs.
Okay.
I'll tell you.
Can you hear me, George?
I can hear you. Yep.
I think this is off Jean's laptop.
Oh, I see. Yeah. We don't have a picture of you though.
That's all right. We know what he looks like.
Yeah, that's true. There he is. Okay. Now you're muted still.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Welcome, County Councillor Anderson. And I want to say David's been very busy. He handles basically a county council, a couple committees in the sense that he has to report on the police service board, which he's on. And Joanne Rousseau's the chair. So he's always having to report twice back to back. So this should be a lot easier for you, David, just to do this. And we'll get you on and get you going. And then thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. So do you want me to start now or have you done
Yes,
your
go ahead.
official-
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yep. We're in ready to go.
All right. Well, thank you, Council, for letting me to be part of your agenda today. It's been a while since I've been to Minto Council with this COVID-19, but we're making things work, and I think hopefully within a year's time we'll get sort of back to normal, whatever that may be. But you know what? I think we have to be flexible, and moving forward. I think not only as the county of Wellington, but also as the town of Minto, we're doing what needs to be done to make things still work. We're still supplying our service to our residents. And, and it's all they can expect of us. But we've done it. It's been a lot of work. It's been a lot of flexibility, but we're making it work. Before I start, I'd like to say thank you. 3 weeks ago on a Thursday morning, it was a rainy, icy, slippery day. I went up to the bank and I almost fell on my noodle on the way back. So I did call the town of Minto's office and I said, the sidewalks are really slippery and really slick. Would there be a chance that we could get the sander back out for just a spray, because I was afraid of people falling and stuff like that. And within 45 minutes, the sander was going up and down the street. Now, I don't know if that was just scheduled, but I was really impressed how quickly they responded. And I think if Mike McIsaac's listening and Councillor Dirksen, who's the chair of that committee, if you could send us thank you to the staff back. It was great that the town had enough foresight to result, because it was dangerous and it was nasty, and it was great to see that looked after. So thank you. So I got sort of a couple of updates in front of you, and I think everybody's had a chance to read your updates, but I'd like to just review a little bit of what the County of Wellington has been able to achieve in the past year. Under the COVID-19, we've had lots of issues with Wellington Terrace, but due to staff and isolation, monitoring people coming in, we've had very little numbers of COVID-19 cases. We have had some, but not to the extent of the other long-term care facilities. And we're not out of the woods yet, but we are moving forward with that. The early years education, it's been an up and down program with that. Daily, the regulations from the province change, and our staff have to accommodate with those changes. We've had openings for first responders, kids, for accommodation for them. And they keep, again, we're not out of the woods with that yet, but we are having some facilities open for some daycare centers. And again, we're under the strict regulations that COVID-19 has put onto us. Solid waste, what we were able to do this last year was we were able to implement the online bag service, your solid, or I guess your, what would you call it, recyclable waste from kitchens. We were able to also generate the curbside pickup for the leaves and branches, that we are doing that 3 times a year. That was a request from actually the last election from our residents, that they wanted that picked up. There is a cost to that, but yet we've complied to that and we're able to implement that due to this program. The Green Legacy program is still going on strong. We haven't been able to deliver to the municipalities like we've had in the past, but we've had people coming and picking up leaves or trees and bushes at our 2 sites in Wellington North and the south part of Wellington. So that's good for that. Our libraries are closed now, but they're running a very efficient system. If you need a book, you just call in, they'll have it ready for you. You are scheduled to pick up at a certain time. Call in, they have your book waiting for you, and you get on with life. We've just, again, adjustments. We've been able to use the 3D printers to make face shields that have been distributed through our local healthcare systems and through our long-term care facilities also. So our library people are busy. Economic development, George can probably give you a full response on what the county is doing for economic development. The Emergency Business Sustainability Fund, which we put $1 million at a low interest rate for businesses in the county to have access to that, just to keep them going. And I think we're not out of the woods on that yet, George. I think we're going to have a few more response for more money on that. But the biggest thing we're trying to do is we're trying to keep our businesses open over this trying time. So we've had a lot of, and the other achievements are in front of you also. We are busy, but we're not closing the county down. We're working with our local levels of government, our local tier of government. We're working well together. And I think really we're stronger for that, because we are so willing to do whatever needs to be done to protect not only our citizens, but get the services across to them that they need. So that's generally what the County of Wellington, an overview on that. I'd like to also then move on just to a little bit of an OPP review of 2020. This last year, we hired a new inspector, Paul Richardson. Paul's a great guy. He's very community minded. Anything that's happening in the community, if there's any needs, whether there's speeding in different areas, he will respond to demands of each municipality. and going to that area to see what is the issue is and how can it be resolved. So the whole thing is he wants a secure Ontario, he wants a secure Wellington County, and he's willing to work with the municipalities and the citizens to make that happen. Pandemic has affected the OPP also, but still they're continuing to meet their crucial mandates and initiatives again and moving forward to keep people safe again. We've also moved forward this year with the community safe and well-being plan. The document has been initiated. It's now going to the municipalities for input. And that is a directive from the Solicitor General that has to be implemented. And it's going to be a good way of identifying different issues of different communities in the different parts of Wellington County. The next program is the Project Lifesaver. And that's a really interesting program that it's been initiated by the OPP in partnership with Victim Services. What happens is that people that are suffering from Alzheimer's or Down syndrome, or basically sometimers, that I have sometimes, but not all the time yet. And if you go missing and wandering, what they do is there are 20 clients in this program that wear little cuffs around their wrists. If they go missing, they can be tracked down by either the OPP or the places that they're staying at, and they can be found if they're lost and brought back to a safe location. It's a pilot project. We're looking at expanding that further, but again, everything is governed to the amount of available funds that we get from the province and the feds for programs like that. Another good program with that. We had the many traffic complaints we've been having around the county of speeding and people driving erratically. So the county in the fall, it was in October, we were approached by the Police Services Board to purchase these black cats. They're like a radar device. And what they do is they regulate the speed of traffic. They regulate the size of vehicles on the roads. And what happens is then we can implement police services to those areas that there's the largest violators. The interesting thing about these black cats is that they gather information on what's happening in the county, and we can share that information with our roads department. So when you have high traffic roads in the county, it's going to obviously affect bridges and roads and the deterioration of those infrastructure. We can use that information to see, what money do we have to put in those areas too. So it's a really great system that we've generated. It was asked by the Police Services Board, I think in October. We had the black cats purchased in November. They've been installed by December, and now we're tabulating that information. There's 7 of them, and they move around the county as needed. So that's a great directive on that. The last thing I want to talk about policing is the impact team. Again, it's doing a great job. The impact team is one of those programs that we had 2 clinicians from the Mental Health Association working with an officer. And when you get a call through a 911, there's a domestic or there is an issue that we know that there's been people that have mental illness issues or violence issues. About 70% of the time, the impact can diffuse the situation before they either have to go on to the hospital or to further on to the court systems or charges laid or whatever. And it's a great system that's working. Just in this last November, we were able to hire a 3rd clinician from the Canadian Mental Health Association to work with this organization. We've got more funding. And you know what? It's a program that is a great program in place. The City of Toronto just announced just last month, it was in the Globe and Mail, they were under pressure that they had to defund their policing budget by 10%, and they wanted to invest that into mental illness support. They're putting this program very similar to what we had, which is our impact program. And I think Mayor Tory, I mentioned this at County Council, Mayor Tory said this is the first program to offer this in the province, and they are pioneers in this program. Well, I think I told the warden that he should maybe call Mr. Tory just to let him know that we've been doing this for the last 3 years in Wellington County, and it's been very successful for us. But anyway, a great program moving forward. It's again giving good support to the people that really need that through our impact system. So that's just a quick view of my police report. Then my next on the agenda, I would like to talk to you a little bit about our paramedic services in the County of Wellington, which is Guelph Wellington Paramedic Services. And in general, our paramedic services just would all respond normally in most situations to 911 calls. People that are in distress, and what they have to do is they have to respond to those calls within 6 minutes. But with COVID-19, what our program and our under the director of our chief, Stephen Dewar, he's broadened his response and his support out to our community in a couple different ways. One of these programs are called the remote patient monitoring system, where there's about 40 or 60 patients at any time that are being monitored by our EMS workers. And basically what it does is that people that are having high blood pressure, they will talk to people that are on taking medication. They'll make sure they're taking their proper medication. They just keep checking up on them. And what that's doing is it's keeping people more healthier and keeping them away from the hospitals. So that's a great program that we're doing with that. The COVID-19 monitoring program's another project they've taken on, where basically people that have tested positive for COVID-19 and are remote in our community, in their homes, or even long-term care facilities, our staff will be checking on them to make sure that they are being properly looked after, properly isolated. And there's currently between 15 and 30 patients on that program. With the flu vaccinations, what's happening is we're using our services also to deliver vaccines to long-term care facilities. The big thing is getting these vaccines out in a speedy, proper process and quick. And our emergency team is doing that and assisting the health unit in getting that vaccine out. They're also helping with COVID-19 screening in long-term care facilities. The last program I wanted to talk to you about is the high intensity support at home program. And this is another interesting program they're doing. There's so many people, seniors, that are waiting to get into long-term care facilities. And sometimes that could take 6 to 9 months. These people are very fragile situations. So what our team is doing is they are making visits. They're calling these people in these situations, and they're just monitoring their health sort of system to make sure that they are still healthy enough to stay at home and help to try to speed up the transition over to long-term care facilities. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is that the community paramedics assigned to this project, they're currently working out of the Harrison Fire Hall. And it was gracious enough for your chief to allow availability for that program to go into place. So they needed a place to work out of. They're going to be there till March 31st of 2021. They're looking for further funding to expand this project for another 2 to 3 years. And our idea is it's not going to be a permanent home in your fire hall in Harrison. They're looking at using the County of Wellington's road departments to have satellite sites around the whole county for that support. But again, thanks for the town of Minto for offering that service. And it is offering a great service for people waiting for long-term care homes. Town of Minto, that is my report for now. I know that I would like to come up more frequently to do this, but between technology, me, and the world in general, it's been a long time. And I would like to make it more frequent visits to you to bring you up on different things that are happening with the county. If Mayor Bridge hasn't brought up to your attention, we just finished our county council meeting on the end of January. We've authorized just a 2.1% increase on our budget. A lot of that has to do with a lot of work from our not only our staff, but our chair of our committees and our county councilors on looking at how we could trim this down, because we realize there's a lot of people in desperate need, and we're trying to get them as big a bang for their buck in these trying times. And I'm hoping that, and all the local municipalities are doing the same. We've talked to lots of mayors, and their whole idea is the same thing. And we as the county believe that's a very important situation to bring forward. That I think it's been our lowest budget increase since, I'm thinking the 90s. I think that's
20 years, and it was
20 years, yeah.
1.2, Councilor Anderson was the
Right.
actual amount.
Yep. So that's how, and we just keep again working together, and together we're a stronger county and a stronger municipality.
Thank you. Any quick questions for Councilor Anderson? Councilor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to back up to that traffic black. What did you call it? A
Black hats. They're actually made in Canada, made in Ontario.
Okay.
And they are there's less maintenance to them. They can handle severe weather, and their data can be stored for it's a 2 to 3 week period, where their old system, this data was only kept for 2 days. So it's more accurate services and stuff like that.
My question is, you said it regulates something. It's just logging data, right? It's not regulating anything.
Right. No,
Okay.
it's taking, sorry. What it's doing is it's just taking data. It's measuring the speed of vehicles. It's also
Okay.
indicating the size of vehicles that are traveling on the roads.
Yeah. Okay.
We're going to use
thanks.
that data to, yeah,
Yep.
no problem. Thank you.
What we'll be using it for a little bit, Councillor McKenzie, is we're working on that new road master plan for the county, and we'll be trying to get some data on different areas that we've already indicated to the county that we feel there's speed concerns and whatnot, and Out Your Way is one of them.
Right.
So we want to get some data in there to see what I like about it is, as Councillor Anderson says, is it basically allows you to actually identify trucks or bigger vehicles as well as cars. So you kind of get an idea of where the speeds are and what's causing the speed. So,
Are they in place now, George? Or?
but they're moving around. Yeah, they're moving around, and through Mike works with the inspector and with the roads department in the county. But we'll be getting a little bit more. I'd like to have another report on that whole roads master plan. And we'll bring staff will make a report on that as
Okay,
to where.
thanks.
Yeah, that's all right.
We're also
Okay.
going to, by next month, we're going to actually have data from those black cats that are going to be shared with the Police Services Board.
Yeah.
And we will also be sharing that with the county, and I can also make sure that the town of Minto gets the same information too.
Yeah, so it's all of the process that we're working on. Yeah, thank you. And I hate to cut it off, but we have two more delegations, and I thank you,
No problem.
Councilman Anderson. And I just remind all the councilors that all our information, our things for the county council meetings and the committee meetings are all on the website. You can certainly look at that anytime and ask either Councilor Anderson or myself if you have any questions on any of those reports. They're fairly lengthy, some of them, but they're a lot of good information, and they're there for the public, and they're there for yourselves to look at. So thank you.
And
Thanks,
thank you,
Councilor
town of
Anderson.
Minto, for your time. Thank you.
Okay, and next up we have Michelle and Bill, and they're going to speak to us about, I think a lot of people have seen the signs out there and other things about the organization that we might be doing some nuclear waste being stored in one of our neighboring municipalities. So if I can turn it over to Michelle and Bill, I don't know who's going to handle what first, but if you'd like to do that, and I know you have a PowerPoint, so if we'll get you up and promoted here. There she is. Hi, Michelle.
Hello, thank you.
Are you doing the talking? And there's Bill.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So you have a PowerPoint if you want us to get that up for you, or
Sure, please.
yeah, thank you. And if I hate to tell you, I mean, it's about 5 to 10 minutes with each of the presentations, if that's all right. Give me a heads up.
Thank you. Over 50 years ago, the nuclear industry told the government to let them start producing nuclear power, and they would have a solution for the waste within 5 years, but they didn't. Now they have a problem. It's safe where it is right now, but politically it's no longer acceptable, and the government and the public are demanding a solution before they grant the nuclear industry permission to expand. There is a lot of money on the line. So the industry has set up the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is funded and directed by the nuclear industry. And the best idea that they've come up with is to take this highly radioactive waste that is dangerous for over 100,000 years and bury it under prime farmland in the municipality of South Bruce. Slide 2, please. And how was this site selected? South Bruce was one of the municipalities who offered to learn more in exchange for money, lots of money. A lot of the money is spent on promoting the project, but there's also a lot of donations to local organizations and community projects. And the specific site in South Bruce, this was decided because that's where they found property owners willing to sell them land. The proposed site has the Teeswater River running through it, wetlands as part of the edge of the Greenock Swamp, springtime floodplains, and the town of Teeswater is close enough to see with its elementary schools and the Teeswater Gayley plant. The plan to bury this high-level radioactive waste is an experiment. There's no operating DGR in the world for high-level nuclear waste. Finland is the closest, as they almost have one built, but they don't have the licensing approval to place anything in it yet. Next slide, please. The only DGR in the world, according to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, is the WIPP in New Mexico. This is for low and intermediate level waste. It's in the middle of the desert and it's 35 kilometers away from the nearest town. The only thing we can really learn from this project is that accidents happen and you can't predict human error. In 2014, the WIPP became radioactively contaminated by the explosion of an underground drum of nuclear waste due to human error. At a January 2020 workshop and the March CLC meeting, 2 different NWM employees explained that this was a success because the radiation was contained below ground. The truth is, according to the official US accident report, 21 workers above ground were exposed to radiation. This is a mistake that took 3 years and $500 million to clean up. Germany has 2 underground sites that have failed, and they're trying to figure out how to clean up the mess. Chalk River and Port Hope are Canadian examples of how expensive and how long it takes to fix radioactive mistakes. The NWMO's plan is to build a deep underground mine that they claim is modeled after natural uranium deposits so that the radioactivity can safely decay. They point to Cigar Lake as an example where the radiation of those uranium deposits is not detected above ground. This sounds good until we ask the scientists to compare a uranium deposit danger to the danger of the used fuel bundles. Dr. Peter Keach's answer at the CLC meeting, it's the natural uranium that we're talking about. It's like the fuel pellet before it goes into the reactor. It's much less radioactive. This is what the repository becomes after the million years. This is just one example of how the NWMO only tells part of the story and does not talk about the real risk of the highly radioactive waste. Next slide, please. The first part of this project is they'll build a deep 1,500-acre underground mine that goes through our aquifer, under our farmland, and the Teeswater River. They claim the undisturbed rock means that the water deep down does not move. But once they start blasting, drilling, and digging, it's no longer undisturbed. They're going through our aquifers, which is a threat to our groundwater. They estimate that the excavated rock pile is going to be 15 meters high and take up 63 acres of land. This is a rock pile that includes chemicals and contaminants from the blasting and digging process, which will pose surface water contamination issues. The rock pile also will have naturally occurring radon gas, which Health Canada warns is the leading cause of lung cancer after smoking. But the NWMO tells us it'll be safe levels. Next, they'll be transporting all of Canada's radioactive waste to this site. Currently, there are around 5 loads of high-level waste moved per year, but an operating DGR would increase that to 1 or 2 shipments per day. These loads will be transported through surrounding communities past the neighbors every day. But the NWMO tells us that the radiation emissions from these loads will be safe. Next, they'll be transporting all of Canada's then at the site, they'll be building a repackaging plant as part of the mine. This is where they'll move the used fuel bundles into new containers. This repackaging plant includes settling ponds, which could allow for more surface water contamination. According to the 2016 NWMO environmental report, this process also includes radiation being released. But the NWMO tells us the radiation released into the environment will be safe levels. Next slide. The containers are repackaged into corrosion-resistant zinc alloy, covered with a 3 millimeter copper coating, and then covered in bentonite clay before being placed into mine caverns and sealed with concrete. Yet the NWMO in their technical reports state, when the containers eventually fail by corrosion as the result of groundwater ingress into the repository, waste constituents can migrate out of the disposal and enter the biosphere. But the NWMO again tells us this will be safe levels. Who decides what safe is? In their February 2020 report to Canada, the International Atomic Energy Agency recommended to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission that they improve their radiation safety standards as they were lagging behind international standards. And how many safe levels can you be exposed to before it's not safe? Next slide, please. And what does this mean for agriculture? Will consumers want to purchase products produced next to a nuclear dump? Will people want to buy freezer beef or chicken raised on or beside an underground nuclear dump? We already been informed by one of our butchers that we sell lamb to in Toronto that he will no longer purchase lamb from our farm. I've asked the company that processes our sheep milk if this will matter, and for months their only response has been, we need to look into it more. That tells me they're not willing to promise they will continue to accept my milk. Last February, when I talked with David Chapman of Chapman's Ice Cream, he was very concerned about the stigma that would be created by a nuclear dump. In a February 2020 CBC interview, Ashley Chapman stated, nuclear ice cream is not how he wants his company to be known. In Fukushima, the farmers are still struggling to convince consumers that their products are safe. Even with testing to show it's safe, consumers choose to get their products elsewhere. More and more consumers want to know how and where their food is produced, and the proximity of the nuclear dump in our county can affect those choices. A study commissioned by the Kincardine Council, completed by the Ivy Business School, forecasted a negative economic stigma, $700 million over 30 years, if the DGR was built in that community. We need to protect the water, and we need to protect our ability to grow food for future generations. This is not in the public's best interest. There's no operating experience anywhere to validate their computer-generated calculations. The NWMO proposes there's no risks. Scientists and geologists around the world are raising concerns. The building of a DGR does not remove the risk from the lakeshore, because once the rods are removed from the reactors, they must be placed in cooling pools and above ground storage for at least 30 years before they are cool enough to move to the DGR. As long as we have nuclear energy, we have radioactive waste on the shoreline. All a DGR does is add transportation risks, place another community at risk, and threaten important aquifers, swamps, and rivers. Rolling Stewardship manages the waste by maintaining it in a monitored and retrievable state at all times. This allows continual improvements to packaging and environmental protection until a true solution can be found. In closing, Protect Our Waterways, No Nuclear Waste is asking for your support. The NWMO claims to be conducting studies on the impacts and the economic benefits. But a close look at these proposed studies shows a bias to the nuclear industry and a lack of independent review. One of the current studies is to determine willingness, and this is concerning as it's looking for several indicators instead of committing to a referendum. In Kincardine, for the low-level DGR proposal, we saw a very biased telephone survey was used to determine that the community was willing. We don't want that to happen in South Bruce, and we're asking for support in asking the South Bruce Council to commit to a binding referendum conducted by a third party. And for more information, we have a website, protectsouthbruce-nodgr.org, and you can also sign up for our newsletters at nodgrsouthbruce@gmail.com. Thank you for allowing us to share today, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them.
Thank you, Michelle. And I'm not, if you take Michelle's thing down there, Annalene, I can see everybody again. There we go. Okay, that's good. And we'll have a quick round of questions, and we have a lot on our agenda. So Councillor McKenzie.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Michelle, has South Bruce made the zoning changes for these farms?
I can answer that.
Okay.
No, they have not yet made any zoning changes relative to the DGR.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else at this? Oh, Councillor Elliott and then Deputy Mayor Turton.
I just wonder, you're recommending we can't get rid of nuclear waste underground. What do you recommend we do this then? Because it's there. We've got nuclear waste to get rid of. So if we don't do it, they think it's the safest way of doing it. You're saying it isn't, or you're scientists. I'm not sure who says it isn't. What do you recommend what they do with your nuclear waste?
Well, at this time, we're recommending that they go with rolling stewardship, which is keeping it above ground in a monitored state until they come up with a real solution.
So wouldn't that be more dangerous to keep it above ground at Kincardine? and wherever?
Like we said, building a DGR doesn't remove it from above ground. It still needs to be above ground for 30 years once it comes out of the nuclear reactors before it can ever be moved underground. And ultimately, at the end, when they've placed it underground, the final plan is to cover it up, take away the repackaging plant, put new grass over it, and hope nobody ever finds it again.
What
So
is
it's
this-
kind of,
What is the safe recommendation? If you don't want this recommendation, what is the safe one? That's,
well, at the end of the day, the nuclear industry's had over 50 years to come up with an idea, and they haven't. To be honest, most of us have only been thinking about it for a year.
Okay.
But to accept the wrong solution is in fact no solution at all.
Michelle, I'll just add something to that. The fact is OPG says it's been stored safely above ground for 50 years or longer, and it can be stored longer. What we're really asking for as well is that Finland is the most advanced country in the world as far as the DGR is concerned. They plan to start their implementation sometime in 2024. So let them experiment for a couple decades while we keep it above ground safely. And then maybe we can consider whether or not the DGR is safe. The fact is, after 30 years, most of these DGR have failed somewhat, and it's primarily from human error.
Thanks, Bill. Deputy Mayor Turton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bridge. Michelle and Bill, what do you see happening in Bruce? I mean, how close are they to making a decision? Are they listening to you?
Well,
What do you mean by they?
So I know it's not the nuclear people because they were going to give you an answer in 5 years, right? Or they were giving somebody an answer in 5 years, but are you guys up against the wall here, or are you getting any traction?
That's a tough question to answer. So right now they would say they're in step 3 of the process in phase 2. Step 4 is where they do the borehole drilling and do the environmental studies, which will be next spring, actually. We are up against the wall to some degree. Our council is very much interested in seeing economic development in the area, and we certainly understand and appreciate that. And so they're very much in tune with the agenda being put forth by the NWMO. It's a tough fight. We're fighting a large organization. NWMO is spending $138 million a year in promoting this agenda. And we're a self-funding organization. So yes, we have a large group of people that are not interested in seeing anything progress for this DGR in our community. But the fact is, it is a very tough fight.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle and Bill. You presented your package very well and gave us some information. And I guess your next steps are the way you're working now, trying to get the word out, right? So thanks for coming and presenting.
Time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to where is he? Gord. Gord, do you want to introduce our next guest, our next delegation? It's right along the water theme here, so.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
So we have Peter Simcisco today, and I see his colleague Tina is also around too. So we've been working with Watson and Associates on many projects, especially intensively over the last year or so. And if you recall back in the first meeting in December, because our permit to renew our drinking water license comes due every 5 years. And as part of that, we have to renew our financial plan. So what we brought forward in early December was everything to do with that, more from the technical point of view, that Todd Rogers and Mike Doucette were doing. But conditionally, we said we'd have our financial plan presented in early 2021. So today, Peter's going to give you kind of a high-level description of the water and wastewater study. And then we hope to actually adopt this plan probably before the end of March anyway. So we had his colleague, Andrew Grunda, and he had to step away for a few months. So Peter's stepped in and he's put a lot of work into it, and I'm sure you'll find him very capable. So with that, I'll introduce Peter. And there he is.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. In terms of the presentation, should I share my screen, or I see you have it coming up there? Perfect. Sorry, just rebalancing my screen here. Excellent. So if we could go to the next slide, please, then. Thank you. So Watson and Associates have been retained by the town to undertake this water and wastewater rate study. The last rate study was completed in 2015 with a subsequent update in 2016. But as Gordon mentioned in the introductory comments, the town is now at a point in time where it needs to prepare a water financial plan in order to renew its drinking water system license. And so the water financial plan will be prepared based on the findings and recommendations of the rate study ultimately. So that's one of the key drivers of the exercise at this time. So with this presentation today, we are hoping to provide council with an overview of the study process and the draft findings of our analysis, and then some options that we have developed for council's consideration later on in the process. We could go to the next slide, please. So before I get into the analysis and findings, I would like to provide a high-level overview of the methodology that is employed in undertaking the rate study. So first, we start with the growth forecast, both in terms of the number of new customers that may connect to the systems in future years as a result of development in the town, and then the consumption of those customers. The growth forecast informs how many customers and how much water consumption the total cost will be shared amongst. Now, with the additional growth moving along the top of the illustration, there may also be need for infrastructure upgrades or expansion, and so the growth forecast also informs the capital works requirements to some extent. And many of these growth-related needs have been identified through the development charges study that the town completed last year. And then we have the other capital needs arising potentially from things like legislative changes that may require updates to treatment or monitoring processes, dealing with localized issues with infrastructure, and then general asset management planning as well. These capital works requirements are then translated into a 10-year capital budget forecast. And then relative to that capital budget forecast, we are looking at financing options such as development charges for the growth-related components of the capital budget forecast, utilizing debt to mitigate large rate spikes, and also financing bigger expenditures over a longer term, and then any grant funding that may be available from senior levels of government, and also reserves and reserve funds. Then, as a result of the financing decisions that are made, there may be some capital-related expenditures, such as debt servicing costs, which then flow through to the operating forecast, as the principal and interest payments have to be made. In addition to the capital-related expenditures, we have the operating forecast, which includes things like salary costs and any external contract costs, utility costs, materials and supplies, and so on. And then finally, because the capital needs tend to be lumpy in the sense that there may be years with a few bigger projects, and then potentially a number of years with relatively low capital investment needs, we utilize the capital reserves as a stabilizing mechanism, building relatively constant annual contributions to those reserves from the operating budget, and then drawing on those reserves as needed to pay for the capital needs in any particular year. And so finally, once we bring the capital and operating forecasts together with the consumption and user forecast, we can then calculate the rates that would be required to support the program. If we can go to the next slide, please. There are two components to the rate structure that the town currently uses to recover the cost of water and wastewater services. There's a monthly base charge that varies based on the size of the water meter servicing the property. And then the second component of the rate structure is a volume charge that gets applied to the amount of metered water consumption during each 2-month billing cycle. The applicable volumetric rate varies based on the consumption block, and this is typically referred to as a declining block rate structure. And so, for example, as you see about midway through the table, the first 250 cubic meters of water consumption over a 2-month period is charged at $2.49 per cubic meter, and then the next 250 cubic meters of water consumption is charged at a lower rate of $1.79 per cubic meter. There's also a very limited number of unmetered customers. There are approximately 3 currently that get charged a monthly flat rate. Then there are also cases where there's a single water meter servicing a property with multiple units. For example, a 4-plex with a single water meter, and there's a separate charge per unit that applies to each of those units as well. And then finally, the town also imposes a rate of $3 per cubic meter currently for bulk water purchases. And this rate is higher than the rate charged to other metered customers, basically because there's no base charge. So the portion of costs typically recovered through the base charge are also included in the volumetric rate in this particular case. So on the next slide, looking at the customer profile, there were approximately 2,336 individual meter connections to the town's water system in 2019. And an estimated 2,352 at the beginning of this year. There were slightly fewer wastewater customers, as you can see in the far right column of the table, and that's a result of private water servicing on a number of properties. So then on the next slide, we're looking at a high-level summary of the customer growth forecast that was developed, which started by looking at the development charges study and the growth forecast that was identified in there. Which identified growth of, on average, about 57 residential units per year for the next 10 years. But then the rate study forecast was modified somewhat to reflect the historical rate of growth over the past 4 years, which averaged about 32 units per year from 2016 to 2020. And so based on that rate of growth, the number of water customers would grow from 2,352 at the beginning of this year to 2,672 by 2030. And then on the next slide, that customer growth is then translated into a consumption forecast where we see annual water consumption increasing at about 0.8% annually on average over the 10-year forecast period. And the majority of the consumption increase is occurring within the first consumption block. So then on the next slide, just a few high-level comments about the capital program. And in developing that capital forecast, we considered a number of important inputs, which I will describe in more detail on the subsequent slides. But at a high level, the capital forecast was developed and was adjusted for inflation, and a rate forecast is then developed relative to that capital forecast to help fund that plan. Utilizing debt where needed to dampen rate impacts and also increasing annual contributions to capital to full life cycle levels by the end of the forecast period. So now to unpack that a little bit more. So on the next slide, we are looking at a 10-year forecast of capital needs for water, and this is presented in constant uninflated dollars, with the blue bars representing the actual capital projects that have been identified for each year, and the orange horizontal line showing the annual average of those needs, which as you see is about $1.1 million annually. Now, relative to those specific capital needs that have been identified, we are looking at the average annual life cycle costs that are related to the assets, and this is illustrated with the purple horizontal line. Now, the town owns approximately $40 million of water assets, which is a figure based on the asset management plan. And the average annual asset investment required for these water assets is approximately $830,000 per year, which was established again through the town's asset management plan. And so the average annual need over the next 10 years is higher than the long run average, which again is approximately $1.1 million annually. And this indicates that there are some short to medium term pressures to invest in water infrastructure above the long run average. And so what is important to note here is that in designing rates, we are looking to provide sufficient funding to accommodate the long run average annual life cycle funding needs and utilizing existing reserves and where appropriate external debt to mitigate some of the short-term pressures. So then if we can go to the next slide, similar illustration here for wastewater assets. The town owns and manages about $48 million of wastewater assets, which again is based on the asset management plan that was completed last year, I believe. And the average annual asset investment required for these wastewater assets is approximately $1.4 million, which again is represented with the purple horizontal line on the bar. What we're also showing then with the orange horizontal line, which is the top horizontal line, is the average annual capital needs based on the specific projects that have been included in the capital forecast. And we see that the average of that is about $1.8 million. So again, somewhat higher than the long run average annual life cycle funding needs. If we can go to the next slide, we have a table summarizing the total capital needs, which here include inflation. And as you can see, the total capital plan amounts to about $63.6 million for water and wastewater combined over the next 10 years. A significant portion of these capital needs are growth-related projects, and this can be seen in the table as just under $3 million of funding is projected to come from the town's development charges reserve funds, and another $24.8 million, which is if you look at the third column of the table and the third row from the bottom, that's $24.8 million from external debt financing, which will be repaid over time as development charge revenues come in. So in total, these growth-related needs represent approximately 44% of the capital needs that have been identified for the next 10 years. Now, in terms of the capital investment needs that pertain more so to the replacement or renewal and rehabilitation of existing assets, approximately $24.3 million will be funded from the town's water and wastewater capital reserves, and another approximately $11.3 million will be funded from external debt financing. I think it's just, before we leave this slide, I think it's noteworthy that the amount of external debt financing that has been identified that would be required to support this capital forecast, which is about $36 million potentially of external debt between the growth and non-growth related needs, would potentially put significant pressure on the town's annual debt repayment limit, which is imposed by the province. However, the vast majority of that debt is associated with the Palmerston wastewater treatment plant upgrades and expansion, which is currently showing up at the very end of the 10-year forecast period. And so there's some time still to do a more detailed assessment of that particular item, as well as its cash flow and debt servicing implications. So on the next slide then, we have a summary of the operating budget forecast. And that operating budget forecast is based on two major components. So first, we have the town's 2020 operating budget with some adjustments made to that based on discussions with town staff throughout this process. And in total, we have the operating expenditures on the water side being forecasted to increase from just under $1.1 million in 2020 to about $1.5 million by 2030. And then similarly on the wastewater side, the operating expenditures are forecasted to increase from just over $1 million last year to about $1.43 million by 2030. And then the second major component of the operating forecast are capital related expenditures. So these would be any of the debt servicing costs resulting from the additional debt that would be needed to pay for some of the capital needs that have been identified. On the next slide, then we have an illustration that provides a summary of the overall financial forecast, in this case for water services, and this incorporates the net operating expenditures, which is the orange portion of the bars, the capital expenditures, which is the yellow portion of the bars, and then the debt servicing costs, which is the red portion of the bars in the middle. And then relative to those expenditures in each year, we are showing the amount of billing revenue that will be available to offset these costs, and that's indicated with the solid black line. And as you can see, there will be some years where the capital expenditures exceed the revenue that will be provided by user fees, such as if you look at 2024 or 2025. And in those years, the town will be reliant on a combination of external debt, as indicated with the teal line, and utilizing existing reserve funds to offset some of those needs. The reserve fund utilization is illustrated with the decreases to the light green area, which is behind the bars, and that represents the projected reserve fund balance at the end of each respective year. So this again was the overall financial forecast for water services. On the next slide, we have a similar illustration of the wastewater financial forecast, again showing the interplay between expenditures, revenues, and reserve funds, as well as the debt financing. And as we can see here, the rate forecast would support the capital and operating forecast over the next 9 years, with a bit of help from the capital reserve in 2023 and 2024. That's why you see a bit of a dip in the reserve fund balance in those years. But then because of the significant capital outlay forecasted in 2030 in relation to the Palmerston wastewater treatment plant, the reserve would be fully depleted that year. And in addition to that, there would be significant external debt required to fund the balance of those expenditures. So on the next slide then, turning our minds to the rate forecast that was developed, we did develop 4 rate structure options or scenarios, as we're calling them here on the slide. And before I explain the differences between them, I would like to point out that the total revenue generated in each year is the same under all scenarios. What changes is how the costs are recovered from different users, for example, from average residential customers to large volume non-residential users. So firstly, scenario 1, under this scenario, we're maintaining both aspects of the existing rate structure in terms of the relationship between the base charge rates as well as the existing declining block rate structure with the 4 consumption blocks. Scenario 2 was developed in response to the observation that the meter equivalency ratios on which the base charges are calculated are lower than what we see in other municipalities, and also lower than those suggested by the American Water Works Association, which publishes guidelines for rate setting. And what this means is that customers with larger meters are currently paying lower base charges than what they would be paying based on the ratios that are more in line with industry standards. And so in scenario 2, the base charges are calculated based on the AWWA meter equivalency ratios, but the consumptive rate structure is maintained as is currently. So maintaining that declining block rate structure. Scenario 3 was developed to be able to see what the rates would be if the declining block rate structure was removed and replaced with a uniform volumetric rate that would be imposed equally on each cubic meter of water consumption. And this is not to say that this is being recommended, but it is a scenario developed to understand the amount of cross subsidy that is effectively provided to the larger volume users in the town. And then finally, under scenario 4, we're both adjusting the base charge equivalency ratio as described earlier, and we're also seeking to rebalance the volumetric recovery somewhat by eliminating the 4th consumption block, and then looking at what the impacts of that would be. So then on the next slide, we have a table summarizing the meter equivalency ratios underlying the town's existing rate structure, as well as a comparison to the water meter equivalency ratio suggested by the AWWA. And as you can see, a customer, so this would be in the middle column, a customer with a 4-inch meter, which is at the very bottom, currently pays less than double the base charge of a customer with a 5/8 of an inch meter. And under the AWWA ratios, which are in the last column, the customer with a 4-inch meter would pay 14 times the base charge of a customer with the smallest 5/8 of an inch meter. And so this would shift some of the cost recovery away from the customers on the smaller meters to those with larger water meters, reflective of the relatively larger system capacity that's occupied by the larger service sizes. So then on the next slide, we will look at the bill impacts resulting from the various rate scenarios that we have developed. And we will look at those impacts for 4 hypothetical customers over the next number of slides with varying amounts of annual water consumption and meter sizes. So this first graph is for a hypothetical residential customer consuming about 81 cubic meters of water annually, which is a fairly low amount of water consumption. So this could be a single person household, for example. Under scenario 1, which is the teal line across the top, this type of customer would see annual increases of about between 5 to 6% over the next 9 years. So again, we're looking at what the estimated water wastewater bill would be in 2021 based on the rates that are currently in effect, and then looking at the impacts of the rate structure changes under the different scenarios relative to that. Under scenario 2, which is the dark blue line, the initial impact for the next year would be lower. So it would only be about a 1.5% or a $15 increase relative to this year. And this is due to the rebalancing of cost recovery from customers with smaller meters to customers with larger meters, which tend to be non-residential customers. And then the subsequent annual increases after 2022 would be similar to those under scenario 1. Scenario 3, this is an interesting one, and one where we see the largest initial impact, and this will be a common theme for the other comparisons as well. So what's happening with scenario 3 is with the removal of the declining block rate structure, the costs would be more equally shared by all users. And so the large volume users that currently get a discount would be paying more, and this would translate into an initial reduction for the average user. That's why you see an initial dip with the yellow line, which is scenario 3, and then the subsequent annual increases would be similar to the other scenarios on a percentage basis. And then finally, scenario 4, where the 4th consumption block is removed, would have a similar impact to scenario 2. So that is the red or orange line that you see on the graph. So then on the next slide, on this graph here, we are showing the bill impacts on an average residential customer. So this would be a customer using about 137 cubic meters of water annually. And the pattern here is the same as what we looked at on the previous slide. So for the sake of time, I won't go through this particular one in detail. And if we go to the next slide, where we see the billing impacts for an average non-residential customer. So this would be a customer with about 1,060 cubic meters of annual water consumption. So under scenario 1, which is the status quo rate structure, the annual impacts would be around 2% annually throughout the forecast period. And the impact is lower in this case relative to the residential customer because the increases are more significant to the base charges, which currently represent a relatively small portion of the total bill for this type of customer, because more of their bill is consumption based. And then scenario 2, which is the dark blue line with a rebalancing of the meter equivalency ratios, this type of average non-residential customer would see an initial jump of about 5.6% next year relative to this year. And this would be a similar pattern, although less pronounced in later years under scenario 4. And then finally, scenario 3 being the biggest impact, again, that's the yellow line, would result in an initial decrease of the bill for this type of customer, indicating that similar to the average residential customers, this type of average non-residential customer is cross-subsidizing the very large volume users. The final set of impacts then on the next slide are shown for a large volume customer consuming close to 95,000 cubic meters of water annually. And I think it's important to note here that their really are only a handful of users that would fall into this category potentially. So we are looking at a very extreme case, if you will, here. Under all scenarios for this large volume, hypothetical large volume customer, the annual increase from 2023 to 2030 would be around 1% annually. But the big impact is in the first year, so being 2022, with the rebalancing due to the change in the rate structure under the different scenarios. So the bill for this hypothetical customer would more than double under scenario 3, which would again be scenario 3 is going to a uniform volumetric rate for all customers. And this would be more reflective of the actual costs of service relative to the current rate structure. And then under scenario 4, which is the orange line, the bill would potentially jump by around 80% with that initial rebalancing for 2022, and then the annual impacts would stabilize thereafter. So then on the next slide, with this last section of the presentation here, we will take the current rates and calculated rates for 2022 under the different scenarios, and then we're illustrating the bill for, in this case, a small residential customer, and comparing that to what the bill would be for that same customer, in this case consuming 81 cubic meters of water annually in a selection of area municipalities. And so as indicated with the gray arrow, we can see that the town is a bit higher than average relative to those comparators with the rates that are currently in effect. And then as indicated with the 4 teal arrows are what that calculated bill would be for that same customer in 2022. And so we can see that that position relative to the comparator municipalities would be unchanged with the rates calculated for 2022 under any of those scenarios. So then on the next slide, we have a comparison for a average residential customer. So again, consuming about 137 cubic meters of water annually. And here we can see that currently, as again indicated with the gray arrow, the town is one of the highest relative to the comparator municipalities. And that would be maintained with the next year's rates under scenarios 1, 2, and 4. However, under scenario 3, which is the elimination of the declining block rate structure, the bill for an average residential customer would be lower than currently, and that would bring the town more in line with the average of the comparator municipalities. So that's the teal arrow about midway through the graph. So then on the next slide, we see this is for a average non-residential customer. We see the same kind of pattern as we did for the average residential customer. So I'm going, for the sake of time, again, going to move on to the next comparison on the next slide, which is a comparison for a large volume user. And we can see that currently the bill for this type of customer, again indicated with the light gray arrow towards the right-hand side of the graph, that bill is one of the lowest relative to the comparator municipalities. And this really is largely a product of the declining block rate structure and the discounts that that provides for the very large volume users. The impact under scenario 3, which is the complete elimination of the declining block rate structure, as well as scenario 4, which is the removal of the 4th consumption block, would be that the bill faced by this particular type of customer would be more in line with what we see in other municipalities. So then on the next slide, just quickly here before we wrap up, to provide a broader context from across the province, we recently compiled data on residential water and wastewater bills from 110 municipalities across Ontario. And the provincial average, which was based on a residential customer consuming about 143 cubic meters of water annually. So that provincial average based on these 110 municipalities is about $1,070. And this is all based on rates that were in effect last year, so for 2020. Now, for municipalities with a population less than 10,000, so more indicative of the smaller water wastewater systems, the average is about $200 or 19% higher relative to the overall average, and that's about $1,270. And for this same customer, the comparable water and wastewater bill in the town of Minto would have been about $1,300 based on the rates that were in effect last year. So on par with the average for municipalities with a population less than 10,000. So then finally, on the last slide here, in terms of the next steps, we are looking to receive any input from council regarding the rate structure options that we have presented, as well as to answer any questions you may have. Then the next step will be to undertake some stakeholder consultation throughout February, getting the report published out there with some preliminary recommendations. And then that will be brought forward for council's consideration and approval in March. And then once that rate study and resultant rate forecast is approved, we will be preparing the water financial plan that's required under Ontario Regulation 45307, which is one of the requirements for the water license renewal. And so we're expecting that to be prepared by the end of March of this year. So that concludes the presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Now, do you want to do the questions? Anybody got any questions for Peter at the moment? We're having another kick at this a couple times. So, we're going to get a report back from staff, but I would like the way it is all laid out, Peter, and that you give us some comparables, which is, we're always hearing that we're the highest in the world, and everybody sort of hears that, I'm sure, but it's nice to see that we're sort of in the average at the moment. And as we know from wastewater and water, it has to be a self-sustaining product. So I like the fact that we're looking ahead 10 years and trying to figure out where we're at and how we're going to get there. So I appreciate your report. Anybody have any questions at this moment, or did you want to wait till we bring this back? I'm not seeing much, so you must have. That was good. Thank you, Peter, and we'll move it forward in the process like the next steps. So we'll go from there. Derek, do you have anything to say, or do you want to?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank Gordon and Mark and Todd and staff that put a lot of work working with Watson. Watson's been a fabulous partner, as they always are, and that's why they're so good at what they do. And I think you nailed it, Mr. Mayor, when you said that it was well laid out and well explained, and you have some comparables. And as we know, we're liking to look ahead and making sure that we're planning in our community to make sure that we have the necessary infrastructure and ready to meet the needs of our residents and our future residents, right? So thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. Do we need nothing on that, Annalene? We're good?
No, that was just delegation.
For
Mayor Bridge.
delegation, right? Thank you. Again, thank you, Peter, and we're moving on. I've got a resolution moved by Councilor Dirksen, second by Deputy Mayor Turton, that corresponds to receive for information requiring direction to council. So has anybody got anything on the correspondence they want to bring up? Seeing none, I will Deputy Mayor Turton, did you have something that you wanted?
Yeah.
You have, I was going to say, you should be bringing something up. You've got your nice report on the Conservation Authority and well laid out. If you want to speak to that.
Thank you, Mayor Bridge. We certainly do. We've been working hard on this. Many hiccups this year, just the same as any other organization. So I'd appreciate it if everybody would take a look. Our general manager and myself will be around to see Wellington North, Mapleton, and Minto for questions. So
good.
I've had a couple of councillors call me about some of the issues that we've been facing. So yeah.
Well, I figured you might be coming with a delegation.
So I mean, everybody's going to see this again.
Yeah.
But if you guys want to just take a close look and have a look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And the only one I would like to point out is from Randy Pettipiece and the infrastructure funding, and Gord was happy to see that report come, and that they come with the same amount as last year. And certainly without that ability to have that infrastructure funding from the province, it would make it awful difficult for our capital programs. And so I thank Randy and the province for that. And the fact that, again, and I did talk to, I mentioned this at a minister's meeting that I was at Roma, that I was really pleased, and I talked to Randy about this as well, that all those funding requests came in fairly quickly this year, so we could actually do a budget really early. So I appreciated that, and I'm hoping that they'll continue on that. As Gord knows, over the years, there's been times when we haven't had that quite as quickly, have we, Gord?
No, that's right. And I think as directed a few council meetings ago, I sent that very message to the minister and to Randy. So yeah.
And I've spoken to Minister Clark and Randy about it as well. So that's good.
Good.
Okay. Everybody in favor? Opposed, if any? Good. Moving on. And we have reports. So we have a Belinda, you were there. I believe you're up first. Thank you.
I am. Hello, Mayor Bridge and members of council. So I'm gonna just go through our cultural roundtable minutes, mostly just drawing your attention to our not-for-profit COVID-19 support plan. So if you recall, the surveys were done back in the end of 2020, and we had 19 responses from various clubs and groups, not the sports clubs. We were focusing on our service clubs, cultural organizations, and other not-for-profit groups. And after all that, we have come up with the action plan that is here. Kind of broke it down into 3 different areas. The first is event and programming support. The second is volunteer support. And the third is financial support. And we've made a recommendation within the minutes that we're looking to spend about $17,500 from the restart funding that the town received to support our organizations through different grants and training opportunities, and then another $2,100 that would come out of the existing cultural roundtable budget. A lot of the stuff are around grants, and the first one that we'd like to get off the ground is a grant for Zoom. A lot of the groups have access to like a free account, but that cuts them off after 40 minutes and limits the number of people that can attend their things. So anyone looking to do like an event online is limited by that. So this is a small grant that would be $226 and would help support several groups. So that's where we'd like to start, and the rest is there outlined in timelines and the different budgets. And yeah, that's been the focus of our last several meetings.
Okay, I'll make the motion and then we'll have a discussion over it. Okay, moved by Councillor McKenzie, second by Councillor Gunson. That Council of the Town of Minto receives the Cultural Roundtable Committee minutes of January 25th, 2021 and approves any recommendations contained therein. Any concerns or any questions or comments? Councillor Dixon. Yeah, there you go. Good.
I'm sorry. So other than the Zoom grant, there really isn't anything else that's been decided on where that money's going to go, the 17,500, is there?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So it's in the budget. And if you see if it says non-COVID, those are the funds that would be coming from the cultural roundtables budget. And then where it says COVID, that would come from the restart. So we're ready to go with the Zoom one. We have the application forms ready to go. Some of the things are like upon reopening. So for example, the promotion grant that we would give to groups, we're proposing to give like $500 that they would apply, and they could use it for social media, boosting posts, they could use it for radio, newsprint, whatever they feel they need to do to help promote their events when they're able to do so, even if it is an online event. So we put in $5,000 there. Also under the COVID, we've put in information and training sessions to help teach our groups how they can run and operate events safely while still making a profit. Other COVID specific ones are we want to do volunteer recruitment's a big one, and it continues to be, but looking at doing some video profiles of the groups and really showcasing through video what it means to be a part of that organization and entice people that way. So that's kind of how we've done it, Councillor Dirksen.
Yep, okay, I see it now. I guess what I was, this is sort of a blanket thing that anyone can apply to, right? I actually thought when you were talking that there was, you know, this group, this much money, this group, this much money. So that's what I was looking for, because I sort of thought, well, I didn't see that, but I see what you're saying now. It's really a blanket, and it's for anyone to apply to then.
Yeah, so we would have application forms, and as long as it's a group that's based in Minto, that is like in culture, service club, not-for-profit group, could apply. And it would be pretty straightforward as well. We don't want to make it an onerous process for them to apply. And we would be looking for staff approval on the grants, because they wouldn't be like significant amounts.
Yeah.
Like 200, 500.
Right. Okay.
Something.
Yeah, I think through the discussion, Councillor Dirksen, it got to the point where some organizations aren't too bad off, or they've got some other funding that have come from other areas. And a good example is when we went into this, I would have thought the fall fairs would be a problem, but now the federal government or the provincial government's come with some money for fall fairs, and also for some of the horticulture societies and other things. So I think the group was really good about trying to lay out where the best bang for the buck and when people need it, how they'll approach us. And there's lots of interesting ideas that were passed about. The one about the doing the Zoom thing, I think that's important. Some organizations just haven't had any meetings because they haven't got that ability to do the Zoom thing. And I think getting that out quickly and getting some buy-in there would maybe help them even organize for when we can get back in the fall, or whenever it's going to be, when we can get back into meetings and stuff. So part of that, I was really happy with the group, and they've done a lot of good hard soul searching and thinking on this to come up with what they've done, but it's not an easy thing. Anybody else? Again, thanks everybody that was on the committee that helped with this, and I will have called the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Pass. There you are, Belinda. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Elliott to assume the chair.
Thanks, Mayor Bridge. I'll call on Matt Lubers if you'd come forward and give the minutes from our meeting. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott, and apologies if I'm in the shadow here. It's really sunny today, which is great. We met last Monday via Zoom. It was our first meeting of 2021. There's no recommendations, but I'll just go through a few of the things we discussed quickly here. One being the arenas, which have been closed province-wide since Christmas. We removed the ice from the Palmerston Arena last month, and the Palmerston Curling Club did the same. That leaves Harriston, and like most of our neighbors, we are waiting to see if the season can be salvaged. If we cannot get started by the middle of this month, that will likely be it for our season here and most seasons elsewhere. At the Norgan, we're waiting patiently to reopen. There'll be a lot of good content to screen once we are able to, but that's still a little ways away, or we're probably talking a few months there. In January, we accommodated a blood donor clinic at the Palmerston Arena as an essential service, it was deemed. They've got some pretty stringent COVID-19 protocols, so it was nice to see that we were able to still facilitate that. We sent out tax receipts for childcare services we provided in 2020, and we're currently recruiting day camp staff and lifeguards to hire conditionally for this summer. If the programs can run like last summer, we can definitely make it work. And that's about it. I'm not sure if there's any questions.
Matt, we had a Norgan meeting last night, and Grace, I don't know, you've been involved in this. We're coming up with a virtual movie. I'll read kind of what we've spoken to Gord Duff, and he feels it was easily to be able to sell enough seats for virtual seats to cover our costs. So basically, we'd be selling virtual seats people will be able to bring it up on their TV. We're working with another company, and there's a price. I think it's $12 to buy your ticket to go. And she ran a test of the link, and it's very easy to get on and the movie to play on. We talked last night too that the possibility we'll make some popcorn and people can come by and pick it up curbside, and so they'll have a kind of a keep our movie theme going, and it's a really good idea. So I don't think we'll have any problem getting our staff to deal with that, but yeah, something that we move forward. So I'll make a motion. I'll have a motion. Moved by Deputy Mayor Turton and second by Councillor Anderson that we receive rec information. All in favor?
Can I ask a question there, Ron?
Yeah, questions, sure.
Just a comment, and I was going to bring it up in other business, but it works out better here, I think. When I had the conversation with Dr. Mercer on Monday with our county group, the question was asked, if the lockout ends, what happens then? So the way it's going to work probably is wherever you were, whatever color you were in before you went into the lockout, the general lockout, that's the color you go back to. Right now, if you look at our numbers, we are sitting in red, and that's what we would go back to. But then she's hoping that if things keep coming the way they are, that we'll eventually might get to orange, which I can't even remember what orange does anymore. But it's funny how I felt that getting to red was a good thing, which the old days, it wasn't a good thing. But so that just gives you an idea, both at for your groups, Matt, going forward, and hopefully by the summer we might be lower than that. But for Ron, I don't know what that means. So that will be originally, so right away you'll go into red, and then every week they'll evaluate your public health unit and decide whether you move to another color. So just to give you an idea, we definitely will end up in going back to red. That's what we started with. So for at least a week or so. So if it does end by the time they told us it's going to end, which maybe it won't happen, right? But just letting you know.
Has anyone got any more questions? Okay, thank you. I'll send the chair back to you, Mayor Bridge.
Ron, did we vote on that? I don't think you got to vote. Did we?
Yeah,
okay, we're all good. Okay, good. Good. Okay, well then next up is Ashley, and she's going to do a one on the Heinmiller draft subdivision. Where is Ashley? She's around here somewhere. I saw her earlier.
Yep, I'm up here. Well, on
there you are. There you are. Okay, yeah, you're moving around on me. Okay, go ahead, Ashley.
So good afternoon, Mayor Bridge and members of council. So a draft plan of subdivision for the Clark Heinmiller property was approved in 2016 with 27 conditions attached. So this subdivides the south portion of the Heinmiller property into 22 single detached lots, 8 semi-detached lots, and 10 townhouse lots. Planning and servicing considerations were given and addressed at the time, and you can see them all in the conditions of approval that I attached for your review. So the purpose of today is to seek a resolution from council in order for the owners to request an extension of the draft plan of subdivision from the county. So this is outlined in condition number 19. The extension is being sought as the owners want the property to be developed in the near future now. Initially, this property was brought forward with an official plan amendment around 2011 to redesignate the entire farm property. That being said, it was passed by the county and then it was then appealed by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And so the OMB reached minutes of settlement with it, and it basically just redesignated the south portion of the property. From a developer's perspective, it's not necessarily feasible to develop just a small portion of that. So you may be asking why this is coming back to council now. So with the Palmerston urban boundary expansion, it's proposing to pull the entire farm property into the boundary, which means that there will be potential for it to be developed, the entire property, and then it is more feasible for a developer to go ahead with that. So it increases the potential dramatically. So that being said, an experienced residential developer is looking at the property, but they need time to address all 27 conditions. So they are seeking the extension from November 30th, 2021 to December 31st, 2022. So they have time. And you can kind of think of it as a phase one of the development for this lower portion of the property, just to kind of get things rolling. So town comments remain, and there's no additional comments that have been made. Everything was addressed adequately at the time of the draft plan of approval, and we are satisfied. So we are seeking a resolution from council.
Thank you, Ashley. It's more of a housekeeping issue, but definitely it'll help us when we go to the next level with the urban boundary adjustment. So looking forward to that. So maybe I'll do the thing moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Gunson. The Council of Town Minto receives the planning technician's report regarding the draft plan of subdivision 23T150004 for Ann Clark and Barry Heimiller in the town of Minto. And further, the Council of the Town of Minto supports the request made by the owner's solicitor on January 19th, 2021 to extend the draft plan of subdivision from November 30th, 2021 to December 31st, 2022 to ensure there's adequate time to fulfill the conditions. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Opposed? Councillor Dirksen? Okay.
Nope, sorry, I guess my internet's slow. I had my hand up.
Okay, well, I wondered, okay, so you're not, nobody opposed. Okay, thank you.
Nope, I'm in
Great,
favor.
thanks. Thanks, Ashley. And next up is a couple good things happening, and I'll get Belinda to fill you
Yes,
in.
it's a good day. We have a couple land sale agreements coming forward here. So the first one is for Credak Developments, and CEO Pipers and I have been very busy. We have had a lot of meetings with these folks dating back till the summer. So it's kind of exciting. We brought our initial report to you in like August or September. So it's nice to finally bring this to you and open and move forward with an APS. So just to refresh, they are looking at the 3-acre parcel that Krasinski owned previously that was going to be the cannabis facility. And the purpose of their development is to build kind of like a industrial condo style development. It would meet our development covenants at 15%, which would be 21,000 square feet initially. And then in the second page of the report, you can see their kind of development plan there. And they also have intentions of buying the additional 3 acres in right of first refusal to expand on this proposal. They do build homes. So they're doing some development right now, commercial residential development in Point Clark. And they're based right now to Mississauga, the GTA area. So we're kind of nice halfway point for them to establish their company here. So they have 5,000 square feet. And then they would rent out other units or potentially sell them too. That's why the condo thing is there. And yeah, this would close in the end of July and would be a nice addition to our industrial park, something we don't have in place right now. If there's any questions?
Thank you. I'll read the motion. Moved by Councillor Dirksen, second by Councillor McKenzie, that the Council of the Town of Minto receives the February 2nd, 2021 report from the Business and Economic Manager regarding the agreement of purchase of sale to Credak Developments, Inc. for Part 4 on the reference plan 61R 9419 in the Palmerston Industrial Park, and authorize the mayor and the clerk to sign the agreement of purchase and sale. Now, questions, if you have any questions for Linda, go ahead. Seeing none, I just thank you, Belinda, you and Terry and the group, and for putting that all together, and nice to see that sale happening. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you. And again, you're up again, Belinda. Go ahead. You're busy.
So yeah, it's been busy. That's good. So sale number 2 is local residents. And again, we've been talking to Chris and Kelsey back since May of 2019. So it's nice that this is also coming forward here a little quicker, I think, than they expected this year, as they're currently renting a space in Elmira and that has sold. So they need to move fairly quickly here. And that's why, yeah, it's a quick closing. This is a 30-day closing. It is for 3.5 acres. So to put that in context, it is around behind Tri-Coat at the back of the industrial park. We had sold a parcel, 1 acre parcel last year to McClellan Industries, and this 3.5 acres kind of goes around that property. This is a phased development. The first building would be 36 or 9,600 square feet, and then additions of 4,800 square feet and 1,200 square feet. So a total of 15,600. As you know, we have our 15% lot coverage covenant, and this falls short of that. But it does, the use of the space and the purpose of the business, they need a lot of space in the yard to run this business. So that is why we're being flexible here. We're proposing that we be flexible. The other point we should make you aware of is that because they want to keep their business operational, they would be putting up a tent, or not tent, a coverall kind of building temporarily so they could keep working, and the foundations would be poured, and then they would get going, pour the foundation, build their 9,600 square feet, and then move on from there. So I think that's it. Yeah.
And moved by Councillor Gunson, second by Councillor Anderson. The Council of Town Minto receives the February 2nd, 2021 report for the Business Economic Development Business Economic Manager regarding the agreement of purchase and sale for Lake Ridge Heating and Cooling, Inc. for Part 7 on Reference Plan 61R 2161 in the Palmerston Industrial Park, and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign the agreement and purchase or sale. Any questions or concerns? Councillor McKenzie.
Not really concerned about Lake Ridge, but Belinda, how many acres do we have left over there that are serviced?
Off the top of my head, we have our certified site, which is about 14 acres.
Wow, yeah.
And then we have another maybe 6 or so after this. So around 20 acres left off the top of my head.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the points I was going to make, Belinda, and I know you mentioned the foundation, their foundation or the pad for the foundation, and it's the same size as the final build out, is it?
Yes,
not?
yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. Yeah.
One of the concerns was how much, so that was just to put that out there.
Yes.
Okay. All right, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Thank you. Very good. Keep up the good work. Only got 20 acres to go. Okay. I guess I turn it back to Councillor Elliott. Is that right? Yep. Okay.
The Director of Community Service Program and IT Service Delivery.
Or is Derek going to handle that? I don't know who is handling that, Derek.
I thought I didn't know he was all of that stuff.
Well, I don't know. It is. I didn't understand why you're getting this, to be honest with you. So maybe I'll take it back from you. Is that all right? Okay.
I just know it was Matt.
Yeah, it's Matt Rec, but he's doing this as an IT guy. We took him from the rec for this.
Yeah.
So Derek, do you want to do this with Matt? Thank you. I got it wrong.
Certainly, I can give you a brief introduction. So the county, back in just before I started in January of 2020, put an application in to fund a IT efficiency review of all the county municipalities. And Northern Wellington was spearheading that on behalf of everybody. And that report's now been done and has gone through the county, and Matt's going to present it to you today. And if we have any questions, we can help answer that. So over to you, Matt.
Thank you, CEO Thompson and Mayor Bridge and Councillor Elliott. Yeah, this just sort of falls under other duties as assigned. So the report pertains to a review that was completed in 2020 by Blackline Consulting through a grant, so at no cost to us. We participated along with 6 of the 7 member municipalities of the County of Wellington. The goal was for Blackline to look at how we all do IT and identify ways to improve. Certainly how we do business today has changed dramatically in the last calendar year. There are 9 opportunities outlined in the report and the executive summary, which follows the report here. And our recommendation is to consider and implement them as feasible. As part of the process, it has been good to get to know Who looks after IT elsewhere? Some have staff or a full department, while others have a point person and use a third-party provider. We now have a working group, which is great, and our intent is to continue to meet quarterly moving forward. And yeah, that's basically about it. It was an interesting process to go through last year. The recommendations are here, and as I said, we'd like to look at them and implement them as feasible.
That's it, Matt?
Yep.
Okay, I'll read the motion. Deputy Mayor Turton made the motion, seconded by Councilor McKenzie. The Council of the Town of Minto received the Director of Community Services report regarding the program and IT service delivery review, endorses the recommendations detailed in the executive summary of the backline consulting report, and refers to staff for consideration and implementation as feasible. And I'll ask questions of anyone. Councillor Dirksen.
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. I just wanted to explore the word as feasible, or the term as feasible. So will each item come before council then? Like, will we be aware of what's happening that's different than what we're doing now? And I guess what I should have started with was saying to you, Matt, I'm sure just going through this exercise was, as you alluded to, you probably have a few people that you can call now whenever you get a challenge in the IT world. So anyways, yeah, so that was my question was, you know, how much information are we as a council going to have when things change going forward?
I'm not sure, Derek, if you wanted to start or.
Sure. So thank you through you, Chair Elliott, to Councillor Dirksen. So the short answer is absolutely, you'll get all the information. We'll bring a report to council. We won't change anything until we get council approval to do so. I think the report is very broad, and even in the executive summary, it's a broad report. So we felt that we needed a lot more opportunity to go investigate some of these recommendations. Given that we're a smaller northern municipality, our level of internet connectivity may not be the same as, say, Center Wellington or other places. So some of the broader migration of cloud-based solutions may not work for us. So these are some of the things that we want to look at, but certainly we would bring any change back to council for their approval. This is maybe in the recommendation wasn't clear, and I apologize for that, but this is not a broad-based give it to staff and let them do what they want here. This is we need time to go look at it in more detail and then bring it back to you if we think something's going to work for us and for the residents.
Okay, thank you. And you answered my related question as well. So perfect. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Great answer.
Okay. All in favor of the motion? Carry.
Okay, and I'll turn it over to Councillor Dirksen.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Bridge. So we have the report, the flood mitigation report that we were promised last week. I guess that just was when we had our special meeting. So turn it over to, I'm not sure if I'm turning to the roads and drainage manager, or to our CAO, or maybe a combination. But anyways, I'm sure somebody will speak up.
Yep. Oh, I'm here. Thank you, Councillor Dirksen and members of council. So in front of you is a brief overview of last week's council meeting regarding the Harrison flood mitigation report as presented by Triton Engineering. And I guess to go along with this report, we did receive word from yesterday from the province in support of our recent NDMP, National Disaster Mitigation Program application. So we are now just awaiting federal approval, or the federal decision at this point, which we hope to hear sometime in March. And I guess with along with this report, there is 5 recommendations to go along with it. I guess the two main key components with these recommendations would be the idea to move forward with the detailed design and cost estimates as outlined in alternatives 2, 3, and 5, and then also coming back with a detailed financial plan to go along with these different components moving forward here. So I guess if there's any questions associated with this report at this time, I'd be more than happy to answer anything.
Okay, Councillor McKenzie?
Thanks, Judy. Mike, why was 4 pulled out of the equation?
So 4 was pulled out of the equation due to the expense and the limited positive results, like due to the overall expense of that. That's the primary reason for that. There was a lot of work to underpin the current buildings, and the work associated with it wouldn't have the results really to justify moving forward with that option at this time.
So from Yonge Street down to Elora, nothing's happening.
From
That was in
Arthur Street up to Yonge Street, that's correct. Yeah, that's basically the conduit in that area. So yeah.
So how can you deepen the river without touching the sanitary sewer down there at Livingston?
So that's where the area is basically going to start, is at the Forest Main crossing there, just
And
below that. Yeah.
Go
Yeah.
down that way. Okay.
Yeah, to the outlet for sure.
Just
there's kind of like 2 components there. So number 2, like the first alternative is basically starting at the 87 structures there, and then coming up to roughly in around, I want to say in around Dredge Creek, and then from Dredge Creek up to Arthur Street, there's minor improvements from the Livingston right of way up to that, but it's basically just regrading and maximizing the flow that can leave from that location.
Thank you.
I think too, it's fair to say that scenario 2 and 3, they build us towards scenario 5, which is where we kind of thought we wanted to end, whereas 4 didn't help scenario 5. So I think that's why 4 maybe got left behind. Is that correct? It's kind of how I read it anyways.
Yeah, 2 and 3 work with 4, as well as 2 and 3 work well with 5. I guess in a roundabout way, if it worked, you could do scenarios 2, 3, 4, and 5 in conjunction. It's just that 4 doesn't provide the end results that I think everybody would really want to see with the costs associated with that alternative.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, so we're putting this and we're receiving this information, or I guess we're recommending it. When do you expect to be budgeting and starting to move forward to something like that, if this is what we're recommending to do?
So right now, if we move forward as proposed, like with the current NDMP funding, we do anticipate that we can basically formalize the plan and come up with cost estimates to complete 2 and 3, and then as much as possible of scenario 4. Okay, so 5, yes. So with the funds available under the current program, so that's roughly 480,000 to do a lot of this investigative work at this time. And with that funding, that money has to be used by March of 22. So they only have a year to come up with this information. So within the year, we would hope that moving forward, that we'd be close enough by budget deliberations for 22, that we may have some options that are bite-sized components per se that we might be able to move forward with in the 22 season.
Is there any thoughts how long it will take to finish and how many years? Budget?
Well, it all really depends on funding sources with this, right? So if we have everything in place and the province and the federal governments might come to the plate with something, if we're successful with an application, with approvals and everything, it could be anywhere from 5 years to 20 years kind of thing. It all depends on how the money comes to us.
Okay, thanks.
CEO Thompson, I believe you wanted to say something there?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add on to what Mike said, is that our next step is to do the financial model and the plan to bring it back. That will help us with the overall plan to start to lobby both levels of government for intense funding. That's really where we want to go. But in the near term, it is, it is 1 and 2 that we want to move on quickly, but not lose sight of 5 is really, we need to get a head start on 5 and really need that package to be able to go lobby different levels of government to buy into that, to buy into the plan. So.
Yep, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And Deputy Mayor Turton.
Thank you, Councillor Dirksen. I think it's a good sign to us having the provincial government endorse this, and the sooner that the feds can do it as well. We have their attention. And I think it's important that we all understand exactly what these steps are about. And it's great to have Mike and Derek on our team to be able to explain that to us. And I know Steve Jackson and Triton as well. I mean, this is a big project, and we have spent money already, and we're kind of committed, but the big deal is the funds. So thank you guys for keeping up to date on this and answering the questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And Mr. Mayor?
Just to follow up on Deputy Mayor Turton, and when we say we're committed, we are committed to the process. We haven't committed anything to what we're actually going to finally do. But at the end of the day, I totally agree that we said to our residents that we come up with some kind of plan. And I'm really hopeful that the federal government will endorse and we'll get that first funding we need to get that financial thing. And once we have the financial thing, then I'm with Councillor Elliott and other people that we're have to figure out just how we're going to pay for it down the road. 5 is going to be down the road a ways, but if you don't start somewhere, I think, we have to have some kind of plan. And even some of the stuff that we're doing early days will help us on smaller events for sure. Even if we won't save us for the 100-year event or whatever, but certainly the smaller events, it will help us. And we've heard that from Steve at Maitland, and we've already seen that somewhat in a couple small events we've had since we've even done a little bit of work down by the Arthur Street Bridge and out. So from that standpoint, Chairman, Chairperson, I would like to endorse it to go forward.
Okay, is that a motion?
Yeah. Well, so you got the motion. You have the motion.
Oh, I already have it here. You're right. I already have it here. Okay, Councillor Elliott.
Just quick.
Sure.
This may be dumb, but I never thought of it until just now. When and if we did scenario 5 and moved around the community, will there still be water going through Harrison? Would there be 2 waterways, or how's that working?
There would be some control flows going through town because it still acts as the outlet for the municipal storm system. So there would be continuous flows throughout. And I do believe they would maintain a certain level of a constant flow. As it is also we need some flows for the effluent of the discharge of the lagoon system as well. So we need to maintain certain levels for different seasons. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, are there any other questions? Lost Councillor Anderson. Oh, there you are. Okay. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, then the recommendation is moved by Mayor Bridge and seconded by Councillor Elliott that Council of the Town of Minto receive and approve the Harrison Flood Mitigation Study dated December 2020, prepared by Triton Engineering Services Limited. that public comments received on the study be included in the appendices, subject to the protection under the Freedom of Information Act, that the study be forwarded to the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, and that the town and MVCA continue its strong partnership as the study is implemented, that town staff to work with Triton Engineering and Dietrich Engineering to develop detailed designs and formal cost estimates that allow for alternatives 2, 3, and 5 to be phased in over time as recommended in the study. And further, that town staff to work with Triton Engineering to develop financial plan once the scope of the project is finalized. Okay, last chance for questions. This time, we'll be talking about this a lot in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? And that passes. Thank you very much. I'll turn the chair back to the mayor.
And I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Turton.
Thank you,
Financial.
Mayor Fisk, or Mayor Fisk, Mayor Bridge. It's the second time I've done that. Sorry about that. So this afternoon, we want to talk about development charge interest. I mean, it's not got a lot to do with development charges in general, but it's interest and early payment agreement. So we'll ask our treasurer, Mr. Duff, to talk about this, please.
Right. Thank you, Chair Turton. Yes, it's kind of a complex subject, but I'll try and make it fairly simple anyway. About a little over a year ago, we had to renew our development charges bylaw because they have to be done every 5 years. And coincidentally, the province was making a lot of changes to the Development Charges Act at that time. So we went and we implemented our DC bylaw based on what we knew, kind of knowing that we would probably have to revisit it again once all the changes came through. And because it's kind of a complex subject, and there was a real push to work together as county municipalities, there was a working group formed with the county and the 7 lower tiers so that we could harmonize the way we implement the new regulations and the new changes. And primarily they affect rental development. So the act was changed, and then probably about 2 or 3 times regulations were issued, and now pretty much everything is in place. So in general, if you have a qualifying rental development, which is 4 units or more, you get to defer the payment of your development charges and also the calculation of that. So traditionally, development charges were pretty simple. You went, you got your building permit, and you paid your development charges. Well, now, all things being equal, if it's a rental project or an institutional one, you get to pay part of it up front and the balance over 5 years. And that's the default agreement. If you'd like to pay it earlier and not pay any interest over that 5 years, you have to enter into what they call an early payment agreement. So I worked a lot with Terry and Amanda and Ashley on this, because with all these rules, what happens when you either do a site plan or a zoning application, at the time the completed application is received, the rates are frozen. So say you came in today, you would pay 2021 rates. Now you could have up to 2 years to actually go forward and build the project. And the other key date is your first occupancy permit. So theoretically, that could be in 2024. So what happens is you would start paying your 2021 DC charges in the 2023, and then track that over 5 years. And if it happens to be a nonprofit development, it's tracked over 21 years. So you can see it becomes quite a tracking and a bookkeeping issue too. So in the county working group, we decided to come up with a common definition for an interest rate rate, one that would be fair but consistent. And we decided to go for the 5-year average of the non-residential construction index. And that index is used annually for us and the county to index our existing bylaw. So we think it's a pretty good thing. However, in our present bylaw, we define interest as, I think, the town of Minto's cost of capital. So we'd like to modify that to bring it in harmony with everyone else. And that requires opening up our development charge bylaw. So that's why you're going to see this goes forward, a notice in the paper and that. And again, we were dealing with Watson and Associates on this project too. So they said, well, that's no problem, but why don't we open up the development charges and incorporate all these changes to the Development Act that have come in since just about a year ago. So that's what we're recommending. This way we'll be able to open it up once instead of opening it up once to change the definition of the interest, and then do such things as taking away the statutory 10% exemption in that too. Also, there's a component called delegated authority. And this would mean that if someone wants to pay their development charges sooner, we wouldn't have to take it to a council meeting every time. The staff would be able to actually do this authority and also act in harmony with the county. Now, if the development is subject to education development charges, nothing happens. They still have to be paid when the building permit is paid. So I kind of view this it's a process change. Nothing's really happening, but we have to incorporate procedures to follow the new laws and the regulations. And if we can have 8 governments all working together, I think it'll be as efficient as we can make it anyway. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions, but where we're at.
Questions for Gord? Go ahead, Councillor Gunson.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Gord, this only applies to like rental units, so right? Like, or multi.
Rental, institutional, yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very limited applications.
So Gord, who are we trying to benefit here? Are we benefiting the developer or the collector? Yeah.
Definitely. I think the whole legislation, it's part of the provincial initiatives to encourage more rental housing, which is something that the town of Minto is on board with. But we will probably end up with less revenue because we're fronting the money, and the interest rate is a way to partially compensate for that too. But yeah, it's definitely a pro-development thing, but hopefully it also meets the objective of getting more affordable housing or even premium housing in this case.
I guess the bottom line is we're getting buildings up and it might take a few years, but at least we're getting tax revenue and that's a good thing.
Exactly.
As well as rental units for our people. Go ahead, Mayor Bridge.
Yeah, and on that, I think you hit the nail on the head, Deputy Mayor Turton. When we had talked about this as partly maybe something that we put in our quiver that through our CIP program or whatever, that if people developed rental accommodation, we'd help them with development charges and give them a little bit of a break when they have to pay them. The province jumped ahead and took it on, and so I guess down the road we may have some situations where I guess another incentive, Gord, would be that if we really want to incent somebody to do a real good rental accommodation thing that worked in the system, that we maybe waive the interest.
That's right. So we added that clause, and it's being included in like the region of Waterloo has something similar and other ones too. And this would have to be done through our CIP. So again, council would definitely get control over that part. But as you say, it's one more tool that we can add as an incentive for certain developments.
Yeah, and I'm hoping it'll increase the amount of people who want to put rentals out there for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Other questions for our treasurer? Hearing none, then we've got a motion by Councillor Dirksen, second by Councillor McKenzie, that the Council of Town of Minto receives the development charges interest rate policy and early payment agreement report from the treasurer, and further that the council considers the adoption of a development charges interest rate policy, and further that the council delegates authority for signing and administering development charge early payment agreements to be given to the town treasurer, deputy treasurer, or designate. And further, that the council directs staff to proceed with amendments to the town of Minto development charges bylaw necessary to implement the development charges interest rate policy and update the bylaw in accordance with the current legislation. All in favor of that motion? Against? That's carried. I'll pass the chair back to our mayor.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Turton. And basically, at this point in time, other businesses is closed. And I think, Judy, you had something. Did you not? Am I wrong?
Yes, I did. Yes, thank you. So I attended the Roma conference last week. First experience for me with a 2-day conference online, that's for sure. There were a lot of funding announcements. I'm not actually smart enough to know which ones were already announced beforehand, which ones were new, because I know that's a but anyways, there certainly was lots of funding announcements, and I always find it exciting to be at the conferences when those kinds of announcements are made. Wasn't quite as exciting sitting in the office listening, but anyways, I was happy to hear that there was dollars for the ag societies and the horticultural societies.
Mm-hmm.
There were lots of options for concurrent sessions, and the same issue applies as when you're there, that you can't go to all of them. You don't still only be in one place at a time, but I guess for the next 30 days or something like that, they can be accessed. So that's interesting. There was a flooding session. Can't remember what the name of the session was, but anyways, I don't know whether you were on that one or not, Mayor Bridge, but
Yes,
my was that Minto's ahead of the curve, and maybe somebody from Minto should have been one of the speakers at that session.
Yeah,
So.
I totally agree with you there, Judy. I was at that one. Yep.
So anyways, but that was a good experience. I just wanted to let you know that I had been on that Zoom. Well, actually, some of it was Zoom and some of it was a different platform. So that was kind of interesting too. But anyways, it's a little bit harder to stay focused when you're surrounded by other things that you think you should be doing. But anyways, it was still a good experience. And I guess there were over 900 people on the conference line. So obviously lots of interest in it as well. So hopefully next year we can do it, shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah. Councillor McKenzie.
George, this is a question about COVID. Could someone bring us up to date on the status of that non-conforming Mennonite church on the 10th?
Yeah, I can probably help you with that.
Or
actually,
out there, and I'm not sure. And
well, Councillor, or Derek, did you want to speak to it, or?
Yeah, absolutely, I can.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor. Through you to Councillor McKenzie. So, Councillor McKenzie, as you know, you received a number of complaints around a church service on the 10th line on January 24th. It was passed on to me. I contacted the OPP on, I believe it was the Tuesday morning, and got a response that they had been out to the church and were working with them on an interpretation of the stay-at-home order with public health. They since have worked with those folks to ensure that they're meeting the criteria as established by public health under the Act. And my understanding is they are continuing to monitor that particular institution. But from what I understand from last Sunday, they were in compliance with the Act. I have some further documentation I can send to you, Councillor McKenzie, if you require it. Just let me know.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Councillor McKenzie. Anybody else? Councillor Dirksen, did you have another?
Well, I actually contemplated saying something about that earlier. So since it's been brought up now, I will. I think it's important to know that the leaders of that church spoke to public health prior to having those services. And all you have to do is read the information from public health. And it says in the stay-at-home order that a church, a funeral, or a wedding is allowed to have a drive-in service, which is exactly what they were doing. And now there were a little bit extra protocols that they had to find their way around because they unhitched their horses. And so they had actually spoken to public health. Their leadership had spoken to public health and had covered those protocols off. And so I think, you know, it's too bad people lose their mind over these things before they kind of read up on them and post them on Facebook and so on and so forth. But anyways, I just think it's important to know that those people didn't do it to be defiant. They actually followed some rules, and they had checked with public health about their protocols and had them approved by public health before they ever had a service.
Yes, and I can attest to that as well, Councillor Dirksen, that they worked with public health and with the OPP on that. Councillor Elliott, did you have something else?
Yeah, I myself, talking about this Mennonite situation, I can understand why people lose their mind about something like that. And I don't think they lost their mind about it. But I mean, they see a bunch of horses and a bunch of buggies going back to back to back to the church. They don't know it's a drive-in session. I don't know how they do a drive-in session when they don't have FM radios. I don't know whether the preacher stands in the middle of the parking lot and speaks to them. I'm not sure how that works.
They used
So
they actually had a PA system, Councillor Elliott.
I certainly could understand why people wouldn't. I mean, they're not going to drive into the place. They just see what's happening. And when you see the pictures on the internet, it looks different than what it really is. And I'm glad we found out that this is happening, but there should be sort of, people should be let know, because I don't know how you do that, whether you advertise it, yeah, they're following the rules, or I don't know. Because probably next week when they do it properly, people are going to see the buggies going there and saying, oh, they're breaking their laws again, which they're not.
Well, I think Derek, did we not put that on our website? What inspector sent to us?
No, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, we didn't send the
No, they have it on theirs. No, that's right. That's right.
We wouldn't do that.
No,
we have we have stepped up our social media presence on different things around the stay-at-home order, and also who to call if somebody thinks there's a breach.
Yes, and yes, and the inspector had talked to us on that. So
they see what they see. They don't see what it really is.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough, and I have to say, everybody's nerves are a little frayed out there. I'm telling you, it's not an easy thing right now. Everybody's just getting a little bit. I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I've talked to some people that have been a little surly that I would never have thought would be that way. And I don't blame them, because they're at the point there, and we're all in that kind of boat right now where we're getting close to the end of our tether. As I said, maybe some of the good news is the vaccines are sort of out there. We'll have all our senior residents and all our nursing homes vaccinated, the second vaccination by the second week of February. I've talked to Dr. Mercer, that's going to be done. They have the vaccines. They held some back so they can do it within the time frame. So that's good news. And then as soon as we start ramping up and getting the other, the county's working on a plan with public health and everybody else to make sure that we can get our general public vaccinated as quickly as we can get the vaccines. So we're going to be ready when that happens in April or May. When we're ready to go, we'll be ready to go. So just hang in there, and the numbers are coming down. I'm a little worried about the new variants that are out there. If we get one of those UK ones, or even worse, the South African one, it's a little tougher to keep from getting it. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, but I'm looking forward to maybe getting the kids back to school and that type of thing, which we're going to hear tomorrow, I guess, from the province, and hopefully they'll be able to give us a bit of an idea of when our people can get back to school and do what they have to do. So hang in there, and if we do get these complaints, and I have to give the OPP a lot of credit, and public health, they were on top of that. They knew what was going on. it's hard to get it out to the general public. So they certainly are aware of the situations that are out there. Judy, as far as Roma goes, it was a lot of fun to listen to. It would be nice to be there. I know somebody else, I think, Jeff, were you on some of the sessions? I was able to get in front of two ministers, Minister McNaughton and Mr. Farrelly with the Western Wardens group, and also with 8 ministers on the Sunday with the Western Wardens group. And we talked about the things we all talk about all the time: rural broadband, workforce planning, all those interesting things. A good example on workforce planning, one of the issues we had it at our Economic Development County meeting today, and I'd be interested to see what the January numbers are, but the December numbers had us around a 4.8% unemployment rate, which is like, that's pretty good. Like, unfortunately, we have a problem in our area that we've got jobs that are going wanting. So workforce planning is actually doing a big recruitment for people that need jobs. I think somebody in Center Wellington said they have a business that needs 58 positions. We have always 100 around TG Minto. So we have to, it's kind of a strange world we live in, where we're hurting in one area but doing well in another. So we'll keep an eye on it and go from there. Anyways, I haven't got anything else. Does anybody? Oh, Deputy Mayor Turton.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Last night was the AGM for the Chamber of Commerce.
Oh, yes.
I figured you'd be talking about that.
Well, I forgot about it. That was one of the things I had down, but you go ahead, Deputy Mayor Turton.
Yeah, so we do have a new president of the Chamber, and it's Heather. Yes. And so we've got a full slate of officers, and the Chamber is strong. There's I'm just going by memory, 122 members so far this year. It's similar to last year. Our businesses, according to the meeting last night, are extremely strong. There was a number of new businesses in 2020 that opened up. Our thanks to, as a council, we need to be extremely proud of our staff. Belinda, Taylor, Summer. They prepare our chamber executive very well. I mean, the reports that were given last night on behalf of the town and to the chamber, they just do an outstanding job. Summer and Belinda and Taylor, congratulations, Taylor, and your new family. But just thank you to that group. And we, according to last night, we're strong. We're really strong here in Minto with our businesses. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor Turton. That was, I forgot that, was going to mention that. Very well done. Okay, anybody else? Moving on then. Moved by Councillor Gutson, second by Deputy Mayor Turton, that the Committee of the Whole convenes a regular council meeting. All in favor? Approved. Any notices of motion? Seeing none. Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Dirksen, the Council of the Town of Minto ratifies the motions made in the Committee of the Whole. All in favor? Carried. Moved by Councillor Anderson, second by Councillor Gutson, that bylaw number 2021-09 to amend bylaw 2018-70, a delegation of powers policy, and to delegate certain powers and duties to officers and employees of the Town of Minto be introduced, read first, second, and third time, and passed in open council, COC of the corporation. All in favor? Opposed? None. Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Deputy Mayor Turton, that bylaw number 2021-10 to authorize the sale of industrial lands on Minto Road, Palmerston Industrial Park to Lakeridge Heating and Cooling, Inc. be introduced, read first, second, and third time, and passed in open council, COC of the corporation. All in favor? Opposed? None. Moved by Councillor Dirksen, second by Councillor McKenzie, that bylaw number 2021-11 to authorize the sale of industrial lands on Minto Road, Palmerston Industrial Park to Kirkdick, I don't know if I got that right, Developments, Inc. be introduced, read first, second, and third time, and passed in open council and sealed of the corporation. All in favor? Passed. Moved by Councillor Gutson, second by Councillor Anderson, the bylaw number 2021-12 to open and establish and name a highway in Palmerston Industrial Park of Minto Road as Noble Family Road be introduced, read first, second, and third time, and passed in open council and sealed of the corporation. All in favor? Wow, finally opening that road. Wow. Moved by Councillor Deputy Mayor Turton, Councillor Dirksen, that the bylaw number 2021-8 to confirm the actions of the council of the Corporation of Town of Minto be introduced and read first, second, and third time and passed on council seal of the corporation. All in favor? Moved by Councillor McKenzie, second by Councillor Elliott. The council of the town of Minto adjourned to meet at the call of the mayor. All in favor? Thanks, everybody, for a good meeting. Take care.